Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Costanza, and I will be presenting a lecture on biodiversity, wildlife reservoirs, and humans infectious diseases, which I regarded quite pertinent to the theme of your week, which is biodiversity and human health. First of all, I'd like to give you an introduction of who I am and who is speaking to you. So I got my Bachelor of Science in Zoology at Queen Mary University of London, and then I moved on to my Master in Conservation Science. So pretty much all the disciplines around conservation to conserve the fauna and the habitat and the biodiversity on Earth. And this is where I sort of got into epidemiology and diseases, especially in wildlife, because that's where I was specializing. And this interest sent me to do my thesis here. So I was in Costa Rica for 2 months, and I was just doing this every day. So sampling monkeys and looking at the overlaps of diseases between the wild monkey population and the human settlements around the area. So I started looking at the end of my studies at how the health of humans and animals can overlap. And this can actually have an impact on the environment around. This concept, I don't know if you ever heard it, but it basically entails One Health. And that's where I work now. So I found a job at the One Health Center of Excellence here at UF. And I went there for 6 months last year, and then my contract got extended, so I've been working there for a year now. And in case you haven't heard of One Health, this is what we do. So the One Health Center at UF looks at issues regarding health from a multi-perspective lens. So we're not looking at just one dimension of health, but we're looking at multiple dimensions. So the initial concept of One Health would put together animal, humans, and the environment, and look at where there were research synergies in order to co-advance the health of the system. What we are doing is really putting everything in there. So we put in sociology, politics, economics, because everything and every single discipline can actually have a very important impact on health. And I can go more in depth into these problems later on in the presentations, but this is just to give you an idea of our philosophy, of my philosophy, and how I am advancing my projects and my work. And this is going to be the background of my whole presentation, looking at the system as a whole. So I would like to start talking about human health because it's the theme of your week. So in the 20s, something very important happened. The antibiotics were invented. And what that meant is that there was manufacturers started producing these medicines, and then there was a burst of production. So between 1942 and 1940 and 1962 is what's called the golden era of antibiotics. So antibiotics started being produced, antibiotics started being prescribed, and what that led to was a massive drop in infectious diseases. So we can see this is the US, but this is was actually happening quite worldwide. So humans at this point thought that this advancement in medicine was so important that we had actually somehow defeated the burden of infectious diseases. So Spanish flu, millions of deaths, the plague, millions of deaths. Well, we had antibiotics now, so we could cure it. And it just really looked like we would not have these millions of deaths and thousands of deaths going on anymore. Now, did we actually defeat diseases? Not really. This is what's happening now. So this is actually where I'm from. This is Rome. And this is what's happening now there. People around the Colosseum and around with masks. So I can definitely state, and I can definitely show you that we did not defeat diseases. We did not defeat infectious diseases. Why is that? What's been appearing in the last few years, actually, are diseases that are emerging from wildlife. So that appeared in the last 20 to 50 years, and it's being a real threat and burden on global public health. And as you can see from this table, you can't read it very well, but I assure you that on the last column, all these viruses and pathogens are present in animals. So now what's happening? Those diseases that were a burden to us, now we're catching them from animals. We're catching them from wildlife. And it sort of became a circle of passing and transmitting diseases. Why? What do we do to make this happen, to make these many diseases appear since the 70s, and they're adding one on top of the other? So I don't know if you ever read Spillover by David Quammen, but it was the book that really got me into epidemiology and wildlife reservoirs and infectious diseases. He's a science journalist, and he traveled the world trying to find out where did the diseases come from and why did they happen. So where did the epidemics come from? How did they originate? Where did they jump? And the quote that really stuck with me from this book is one that I want to share with you, which is by John Epstein. He's a wildlife veterinarian, and he says that a lot of these pathogens that come out of wildlife into domestic animals or people have existed in wild animals for a very long time. When we humans disturb the accommodation, when we encroach upon the host population, hunting them for meat, dragging or pushing them, disrupting or destroying this ecosystem, our action increases the level of risk. The new host might be any animal, but often it's humans because we are present so intrusively and abundantly. We offer a wealth of opportunities. And this is where I really want you to focus, the wealth of opportunities that we're offering these pathogens. And opportunity in terms of virology and epidemiology is quite a complex concept. So I like to give you an example, the one that really stuck with me while I was at university, because it's quite insane. So what is an opportunity for a pathogen? So we have the flatworm Riberoia ondatre, and what he does is that he infects birds. Predatory birds, birds that live in aquatic habitats. They're usually herons, they're usually big birds that predate. And the adult parasites live in these birds, and they release their eggs, and then the eggs are present in the birds, and then the birds defecate the eggs, and they're excreted via feces in the water. In the water, this little snail, she's scraping the bottom and picks up the eggs, just eats it and picks up the eggs. So the eggs then hatch, and the baby parasites, which are called cercaria, they swim around, they're released from the snail, and they swim to tadpoles and frogs. So the frog is infected. So the frog is having baby parasites, the parasites grow, they become adult, and bam, they go back into the bird because the bird will eat the frog, because it's a predatory bird, right? And this is quite straightforward. This is what's happening, the parasites goes around, and this is a pathogen life cycle. However, how does the pathogens make sure that it is transmitted back to the bird, that the life cycle actually continues? How does it make sure that it won't die? It's crazy. So the frog, if it's infected, it will grow extra limbs. So the pathogens enters the frog, and it makes sure that it will grow extra limbs. Why? Because then it will be harder for the frog to escape the bird, and it will be higher the chances of the frog to be predated and eaten. So in this way, it absolutely maximizes the chance of getting to the bird. So this is the length at which pathogens are sort of like, they want so bad to continue this life cycle that they make these things, and they may grow extra limbs. So that's how badly pathogens want to catch the opportunities that they have in niches and in the ecosystem. And so that's what I want to stress, like they go on so much length just to catch opportunities. So imagine when we're doing this, and this, and this, and this, and this. Like we mix and match animals from wildlife, we put them in enclosed systems, and we put them close to each other where they weren't in the wild habitats, and then we put humans in there. Humans that buy, humans that sell, humans that go around, and then we put kids. And we just like put everything in these wet markets and closed ecosystem. Just any idea of the opportunities that are in here for pathogens to just jump around. Like they put extra limbs on a frog just to be passed. And here they could do so much. Basically, they could do so much. Because where did this come from? So these animals that we now see for sale, so mainly the illegally traded wildlife, they're coming from wild habitat. A wild habitat that it's been, well, not lately, but it was pretty much untouched. Right? And what we're doing by taking the animals is that we are depleting the habitat of biodiversity. So we are emptying more and more and more. And to make you understand what it means, the link between biodiversity and health, I will share the theoretical example of epidemiology, where we have a pretty healthy habitat now, and there is quite good biodiversity amount. Now, these animals don't necessarily live together, but it was just for the sake of the example. So it's quite healthy, lots of different animals living there, and everything's going quite well. And this is called the zoonotic pool, meaning that it's the pool of animals where a pathogen can pick which animals to infect, which one to select as its reservoirs, and sort of like where the diseases can be catched and transmitted. And it's quite big, it's quite diverse, it's quite And the hidden feature of this is what we call in epidemiology the dilution effect, because every single organism bears pathogens. So in this case, we call it the dilution effect, because imagine that a living organism or a person comes in contact with these three individuals, right? So it has 1 out of 3 chances of catching a pathogen, because the pathogens are diluted across the very infected individual and across the less infected individual. So you have a low chance of catching infection. But then what do? Take. We take so much that the dilution effect just decreases, and we have a much higher risk of disease. We have a much higher risk of catching an infection because the biodiversity will decrease, which means the dilution effect will decrease. And our chance, other animals' chance of catching these pathogens is just higher. So I hope that was clear, this link between, this is the definition of the word, so it's literally taking out the incompetent host. And so we increase the level of disease risk, which was decreased by the presence of the dilution effect. So there is a tight link between taking out of wild habitat biodiversity and an increased risk of diseases. Now, we should ask ourselves, well, does it stop here, or is it a vicious cycle? Does it mean that less biodiversity means more diseases? Those diseases, do they catch wildlife, and do they decrease wildlife even more? Are we continuing this cycle, or do they do nothing to wildlife? That really depends, because some species will not be, they will be infected, but they will not be symptomatic. So some animals catch the diseases, but they don't show any symptoms. For example, the SARS and the MERS, they cause hundreds of deaths. And bats and camels don't care. They just have it, and it's like these persistent infections that they have and they pass around. And it's a strategy for the pathogens to, make sure he lives in one host. And this happens for others, such as Ebola. It doesn't do anything to fruit bats that harbor it. And same with the hemorrhagic fever in the field mouse. So field mouse are completely asymptomatic, and it has very bad consequences in people. So we could say, well, okay, we decrease the biodiversity, we increase the chance of diseases, but they don't do anything to wildlife and animals anymore, so should we really worry? Yes, because evolution is a process that follows chance and odds. So yeah, these ones don't die, but these ones do. So we have found influenza viruses in seals, and the plague in prairie dogs, it kills hundreds of animals. Ebola doesn't kill bats, but it kills monkeys. And rabies in dogs, but even the wild canines in the wild habitat. So we are decreasing biodiversity even more. So what happens at this point? That we have less biodiversity, and we increase the risk of diseases. Once that increase, that can impact on biodiversity, less biodiversity, less dilution effect, more diseases, and back again. So we're sort of like causing this vicious cycle by sort of like wiping out habitats of the life that should be there. And I hope this theoretical background makes clear where the link stays between biodiversity and human health, and also animal health. But to give you a more visual example, I will give you something that actually happened in the 2000s, in 1998. The Nipah virus hit Southeast Asia. Now, I have to give you a bit of background on what was happening there in that area. So there was human encroachment. So people were increasing in the area, and they were establishing plantations, the monocultural plantation that would bring in money. So mangoes, palms, and all these fruit trees. At the same time, this all happens in the tropics, which means that wildlife is very abundant. What does that mean? Very abundant zoonotic pool, like opportunities. And alongside the plantations, they put farming. So domestic animals, cattle, pigs. So we put in domestic animals, and so wild animals, next to new plantation and new people. And all that happens quite rapidly, actually, in just a few decades. We're changing so much, and evolution is just not used to these rhythms. So that was what's happening there. Now, bear with me, because the next slide I made a little complex, but just like to make sure that you understand the dynamics of it. So we have the giant flying fox. So a fox is a bat, is giant, and it eats fruits. Now, he was living in these areas across quite a good biodiversity of trees and vegetation, eating fruits, just like quite a few of them, living around Malaysia and Bangladesh. Now, what happens? As I mentioned, palm plantations and mango plantations, just like wiped out the biodiversity, put some monocultural plantations, and settled down there. What does it mean settle down there? That you need to make a profit out of these plantations. In terms of palm trees, I don't know if you guys ever heard of the date palm sap. It's like maple syrup, and it's very famous around Bangladesh. So people would just poke these trees and filter out the date palm sap. And it doesn't require much processing, so it's a very easy product to sell around. And they would just like put pots to filter it and then gather it and sell it. And then what was happening around the mango plantations were, as I mentioned, the farms. So pigs. Pigs were going around, mangoes were falling from the trees, pigs were eating the mangoes, and this all was happening. What about that guy? So what happens is that natural habitats was lost because it was replaced by the plantations. There was no food because you took away the trees, you took away the fruits that they were used to, and the stress. There's a lot of, like, human presence is so much stress for the animals. They were told that corticosteroid levels go down, which means that their immune system shuts down. So they don't have any more food, they don't have any more trees. What do? Go to the date palms and go to the mango because they're eat-fruiting bats, right? But these bats, while they were eating, while they were feeding on these date palm sap, they were releasing, excretions and urinate and defecate and saliva and everything because they were just eating there. Sometimes they would find dead bats inside pots and just like take them out and sell the date palm sap anyway. So like that was happening, but I mean, it's just a bat, what's gonna do? Well, one thing that it was releasing was the Nipah virus because this Nipah virus is harmless in bats and it was passed on to pigs. So this Nipah virus is passed on to pigs that eat mangoes that had bat excretions. We drink the date palm sap that had bat excretions. What's going to happen with this opportunity that they have? Outbreak, Nipah virus. So I hope it is clear how sort of really like encroaching biodiversity and animals can lead over time to epidemics because we are trying to control an environment that we cannot control. And so these little consequences actually come to bite back at us through these epidemics. And so the Nipah virus, there were about 350 people that died. It's not eradicated yet. And it also the animals, like this resulted in over 1 million pigs being culled. So it's not just the human lives, it's also the animal lives. And the WHO report, which is quite an official one, also stated that most likely this virus outbreak was due to the loss of habitat and biodiversity, and how we just shaped around the environment a bit too much and caused this disease to spread. So to bring you back to more current issues, I'd like to talk to you about the coronavirus and what's happening there in terms of wildlife reservoir and epidemiology. So this coronavirus is now across 44 countries as of this morning. Asked my boss to check it every morning and every night. And also Italy is now third place on the infections. So I'm really keeping an eye on there. But how do we relate that to wildlife? An article has found that there is a 99% genome sequence overlap between the coronavirus 19 in humans and one in pangolins. Now, I don't know if you guys know pangolins, but they're very harmless animals. They're mammals, but they look like reptiles. And their only defense in the wild is to roll up into a ball. And that's what they do, they just roll up. And so they're so vulnerable, you just pick them up, and that's what's actually been happening. We've been picking up pangolins for decades, and we've been poaching them. In Asia, they pretty much wiped out, so now we went to Africa to pick them up. And this is actually a seizure of 10,000 kilograms. I don't think in tons, so 10,000 kilograms of scales. They just don't weigh much. That's about, I think I read the estimate was 20,000, 30,000 pangolins just killed for the scales. And the title of my next slide is a bit provocative, but just what I wanted to get across is for what? Why are we killing all these thousand animals? Why are we moving them across the world? What's the goal? So the scales are used in traditional Chinese medicine, something that's not scientifically proven, for lactation difficulties and arthritis. So they're powdered, they're made into pills, and they're taken and they're sold, and that's why they've been sent. That's why 10,000 kilograms are being sent all the way from Africa. And another fact is that the meat is a delicacy for some ultra-wealthy people across China and Vietnam. So the reason why this is happening, the reason why so much is going on behind the poaching of pangolins, why so much effort and money are going there, is because something that I'm asking myself, is it really worth it? Is traditional Chinese medicine and some delicacy meat. So that's what I wanted to say about the sort of like why this is happening. Now, it's not certain it is the pangolin, so don't take me 100% by word here, but if it was the pangolin, this is why that would be. This is why the pangolin is trafficked so much. It's the most trafficked mammals. So you can imagine. And this is just an hilarious thing that I found on Facebook and I wanted to share. Like the reason this is happening, if we don't leave the pangolin alone, just leave the pangolin alone and we could avoid some epidemics. So it's like, I have much more viruses where that came from. But moving from that, I also want to stress that I know I've talked about Malaysia and Bangladesh, but this is not just a problem of developing countries. It's not just because people in Asia eat pangolins. It's not just because of that. The epidemics happen everywhere. The mad cow disease, I don't know if you heard about it. It's a very bad one. It hits the brain. It's an encephalopathy and it originates from a prion. So it's a very hard pathogen to study as well. And it spread across the UK. It killed about 200 people and millions of cows were killed. Why? Because we were feeding cows to cows. Like, okay, maybe we're not taking wildlife and we're not decreasing biodiversity, but we're feeding cows to cows. Like, we have to understand that shaping the environment around us as we want and as we please, it's just going to turn back on us and it's just going to bite back at us. And so it happens everywhere. It's not just in the developing countries. In developing countries sometimes have a very high amount of biodiversity, and this can definitely have an impact on diseases, as I showed. But it happens everywhere, just because of how unsustainably we live in this planet. So what has been done, you probably don't know the CITES, so maybe you do. It's the Official Organization for Wildlife Crime and Illegal Poaching. And they're doing a lot. There's a lot of work going on. There's a lot of patrolling, control, and also protests and manifestations. I mean, me, myself, I've been dressed as an elephant in Brighton, trying to do an ivory ban manifestation. But it's legal. Like, we can make our voice being heard, but it's baby steps. We can get there, but it's probably going to be slow and very sort of effortful effort. But probably this is what it takes now. So we're actually going to get this red flags in open eyes where we see 80,000 infections, almost 3,000 people died now. And so we will probably, via these epidemics, we can probably realize how unsustainably we are treating all the health around us and how this can just impact our health. And this is probably going to open some eyes, and I think it did, because as I told you, I'm following all the updates, and now there was a temporary ban on wildlife trade at the beginning, and now seeing that this virus is not stopping its spread, now the ban is being made more comprehensive. And these decisions, when they are made, even though they respond to emergency, they're usually legally binding. So these ones are going to be long-term decisions. And however, even though this can be a massive step in terms of fighting what we're having, it would also mean another thing. So when I was saying One Health, that means that we also have to consider the social and economical aspect of it. Banning wildlife trade would be yes, it would be very beneficial for biodiversity and for the environment, but it would cost about 7 billion and to the Chinese economy, and about 1 million livelihoods would be completely left out of job. So yeah, we have lots of animals, but now we have this whole other problem. There are solutions though. When working in conservation, lots of conservationists, when I was in Costa Rica, they were working on finding alternative livelihoods to sea turtle eggs poachers. And so these guys were not poaching the eggs anymore, but they were patrolling the beach instead. So you can find alternative livelihoods. So I believe that these big steps, alongside with baby steps that would target the other aspects of this problem, could really lead to a solution slowly, but a solution could definitely be found. So the take-home message from this talk is that, I don't know if I stressed it enough, but we made this epidemic. It's our fault. And there is an article that I think the title is just "We Made the Coronavirus Epidemic," but was by David Quammen, the author of the book, which is really good. It just leads you through what the problems are. It's sort of like what I've been talking about it. And so we made this epidemic. it is very important, as I'm doing now, to increase the awareness and get the message out there. So living unsustainably is not beneficial for anyone, not even for us. So it's important to get a message out there. These little wake-up calls, which are these massive epidemics, are definitely helping in making people aware. But even now, with these new social media tools that we have, it's just very important to get the message out and try and live sustainably as much as you can. So you can see how one disruption somewhere, so one more pangolin being poached, it creates a whole mess. So it can imbalance the system because we work as a system. And it's yet another evidence of how tightly things are connected on Earth and how the health of one can impact the health of all. Because in the end, we are animals and we are biodiversity, and we are one and we are part of this world. So we need to treat biodiversity as success. And we just need to live sustainably and do everything in just the right way and not like we're doing anymore. And now I'd like to end with giving you, have you seen the movie Contagion?
Yes.
So good, so good. So it's amazing. For me, I'm into these things, so Contagion was amazing. But for you who haven't watched it, it's basically this apocalyptic scenario where this massive pandemic comes out and kills millions of people. And at the end of the movie, it's not spoiling anything because it's sort of like how it happened. At the end of the movie shows how the virus got to patient zero. With patient zero is the one that starts an epidemic. And it shows really how human encroachment leads to disruptions of the ecosystem, and that can lead to diseases. And so I'll show you this clip. I hope it works. The music goes to the music. So she's patient zero.
That's probably
So she goes back to the US and just spreads. But see, like it was just a bulldozer coming, taking the trees down, the bats not having food. So, and it did inspire on the Libra virus. So that's pretty much that. But I mean, it means that it did actually happen. These things can actually happen. And yeah, this is, if you're interested, I can share the slides with Nina. We can share them around. These are, yeah, of course. And these are some of the things that I mentioned. And if you want to read more in depth about it. And thank you very much. This is me. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and I'll take any questions now. Thank you.
What are some of the symptoms of the Nipah virus?
So the Nipah virus resembles very much a flu, but it's more respiratory. So we're having cough, we're having shortness of breath, and sort of like difficulty in breathing. And the bad cases have a high fever. So these are usually the cases that are considered highly infectious and will go to the ICU. But if you don't get if you get a mild infection, it's actually just a fever, like a flu. Yeah.
too.
Do you think like reintroducing wildlife would help strengthen the dilution effect?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, yes, because it would just, so definitely if you're reintroducing wildlife, it's something that's done very much in conservation studies. It's a reintroduction from my zoos, you know, sometimes they do the reintroduction. What they do before reintroducing them is always a check. So they always check the pathogens of the disease is present. So they won't introduce something that's bringing, I don't know, rabies into a habitat. So yes, I think it would be very beneficial, especially because they're thoroughly checked before being reintroduced. So yes, I believe it would be great.
Jennifer?
How hard is it to find alternative jobs so the wildlife doesn't get affected as much, while also people can earn their livelihood without having to plant so many crops and things like that?
Okay, good question. Because that is actually very hard. So I remember from what I can talk about personal experience, when I was working in Costa Rica, I had a PhD student with me that wanted to build wildlife corridors between the two national parks. That means that wildlife will be free of going from one national park to the other, but the problem is that this corridor was going to be built on human settlements. So we were trying to convince these people to sort of like make way and reduce the plantations that were present there and make space for biodiversity and avoid poaching and hunting. So that they were really living on, and it can be very hard. Some people were just like shut the door and not wanting to listen, because the important thing I feel from what I can say is to really find a connection with these people and find what they want. Because if you go there, I'm just like, I'm a white girl, I work in the US, and I'm gonna come and try and change your livelihood. Like, you can't kill the monkey because you can't kill the monkey. They're gonna be like, well, no, I've killed monkeys my whole life. There is, 60, 70-year-old guys, that's what they've been doing their whole life. So some of them can be really tough and stubborn. For example, they do gold mining there, and they've been doing gold mining the whole life, but they're doing an explosive way. They literally wiped out the biodiversity in a river. So some of them are very hard to deal with, but we had some good cases of, there was this guy who was like 60 and he's been poaching sea turtle eggs his whole life. And then we basically offered, they basically offered a similar amount of money for him to just go around the beach and control and poach. And he was just happy with that. It's just like, it's about, they don't do it in a mean way. They just do it because of the profit that they've always been seeing from it, because they haven't really seen the bad consequences of it. So I'd say if you give the right incentives, then it could work, but you can also find some hard ones.
Kind of like jumping off Taylor's question, when you, so human encroachment is one of the big factors in it. What's kind of solutions are you guys going through to kind of decrease human encroachment, even though our population's not getting smaller anytime soon?
Yeah, that's a good question. So reacting to human encroachment, I'd say let's try and reduce the population as we can. I don't want to say a one-child policy, but I think reducing and it's not really the amount of the population, sometimes it's just the space that we take. Sometimes you can see that some things are just too big, that we don't need that much, because especially in the developed countries, our requests are so high. Now we're requesting avocados like crazy. So what does that mean? A lot of land is now needed to plant avocados. And that's going to take land away from biodiversity. But why? Because of the requests that we have. So really, it is about the amount of people, but it's also about the needs that we have and the requests that we have. So that's why I said living sustainably, because living sustainably, even if we're a lot, can resolve human encroachment without having to, stop having children.
Yeah.
What happens when viruses like these mutate? Does it affect biodiversity?
So actually, when they jump, because the thing about viruses and pathogens, like it said in that quote, is that they've been living in wildlife for ages, throughout evolution. I'm now working on a virus of sea turtles that's been there for millions of years. And then we warm the ocean, bam, disease. So these viruses have been there for a long time. But the problem is that when they find an opportunity, they mutate. And the strain sort of evolves to pass on to another host. And that's, I think, is the main mutation, the main harmful mutation that can happen when these viruses become so powerful that they can jump to other hosts. And sometimes when they mutate so that the host will survive this virus, it means that they don't find a dead-end host, but they will jump even more. So the mutation is actually the driver that leads to pathogens evolutions and leads them to jump around all the time. Mutation is what has probably led the parasite to adapt to make a frog grow extra limbs, which is just insane.
I didn't know.
But yeah, so yeah, it can be quite harmful.
In terms of like taking action, where do you think like the first place to make changes should be? Like stricter agricultural practice regulations, or like stricter like working against habitat loss, or where do you think like the first force should be?
So I think it will mainly be habitat loss, I'd say, because that's been one of the main problems right now. And that's the one, I'd say, that starts a chain of events. So habitat loss also means that we're taking over the habitats, so we're getting closer to them. And so that means that these practices are easier because we're just closer to them and we're everywhere. So I'd say combating habitat loss and leaving a wild habitat pristine would consequently fight also the other issues. Then obviously, these are practices that's been there for decades, again, so it's going to be really hard to change them, as she was saying. But little steps can be made on that, but I would put my focus and concentrate my efforts on combating the habitat loss, because that's where all the biodiversity loss comes from, pretty much.
Do you think the coronavirus will have a positive impact on the pangolin population, or will people see it as like the cause and almost want
That's
to
a
get rid
really
of
good
it?
question, because that can go two ways. So now we can have, okay, no poaching pangolins because they have harmful viruses, so let's just leave them alone. Or it can be all the pangolins have the viruses, let's just burn them all. So it can go two ways. And now, being the message of, like, the message that I've given you, the message of disturbing wildlife so strong, then it could actually be that people will react to that in a positive way, because conservation now is so powerful and is now entering the developing countries as well. So the likelihood of pangolins being killed is actually, I think, is quite low. Also because now these viruses, since it has human-to-human transmission and we not have many pangolins around, pangolins are very rare. Like calling them, I don't know how much it would solve the things, especially in the wild, because the pangolins that gave it to us were the ones that were present in the urban environments. So I think that a killing around reaction is not that likely, but I can't say for sure.
Alexis.
Do you think that, because we've had epidemics before, but we always seem to like make regulations right after that epidemic, but then go back to our old ways. So why do you think that keeps happening? If, like, you know,
Why does that keep happening? Yeah, because we're stupid.
If I can jump in, what we are doing in our center is to include other discipline because of that, because history can matter. So sometimes, like, if you just focus on a med school, but then you forget other stuff, you cannot approach the issue from a complex perspective. And then, humans are, they contradict themselves, which apparently, scientists cannot really deal with that, but that's the problem. But I feel like, as she stressed a lot, what we are doing at the center is look at an issue from a very complex, multidisciplinary perspective. And that means that when, I really like your question where you should start, but maybe it's from anyone, because if you have a background in literature, you don't think about maybe I should not think about, the agriculture. It's just each one of us can contribute somehow. So it's just each one of us can do something about it.
Yeah,
anyway, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you for that, because I think it's very important insight that she's giving, because we work alongside, we're colleagues, and she's a classicist and I'm a wildlife biologist. So that's the extent that we're going working collaboratively because of the benefits that we can have. So
It's true.
So anybody who hasn't had a chance to ask yet.
You were talking about how they make products out of the pangolin. I was just looking at the news, and there was a piece that was saying that they don't know where the first case of the coronavirus emerged from, because that person seemed that he didn't travel. So do you think that it could have been done due to the consumption of the products that were infected?
So I think that, so the origin was pointed to the wet market in Wuhan, which is called the Wuhan wet market, but that's now it's being confuted. Now they're saying that it was there before, and then it was brought into the wet market. Now, how I think, and I am, I'm not the WHO, but what I think happened is that the pangolins were sold, like I was showing in that slide. They maybe were sold like this for, for meat, rather than the actual scales, because I don't think those are contagious. And let me so many slides. Okay, they were sold like this, like alive, and that's being a respiratory virus. I think that's how it could have gotten to people from the pangolins. So from alive animals rather than scales or meat. So I think that's how it happened. Did I answer your question?
I was referring to like the case in California, like how it transferred. Because they were saying that the first person that got it from California in the US did not travel. So they don't know where it actually came from.
So now what we are starting to see after a while is human-to-human transmission. And we had the first human-to-human transmission in the US. So it's not clear if that is how the virus adapted after a while and started just transmitting for humans, if it was like that at the beginning. So it can be that this person didn't catch it from a pangolin or an animal, but caught it from another human that's infected but asymptomatic. Because what I'm showing here is a confirmed, in this map, it's a confirmed cases. It's like 80,000 right here. But there could be so many more because people just don't show symptoms. So we are suspecting that the patient one in Italy caught it from a friend that was traveling from China that was symptomatic and didn't develop any symptoms because the person that actually, the patient one in Italy never traveled. So it might have gotten into contact with someone that was traveling even directly, being in the same restaurant, and didn't know that he or she had been traveling, and that's how he got it. So it for sure got it from another human.
Has there been like a case where they like wipe out like a very large number of a species to like get rid of the disease, or do they only do that when a species is like already like there's a lot of them, so it doesn't make that much of a difference?
Okay, so like a species that has a big disease, you mean like culling? Pretty much, culling. Oh, yeah. So I don't know if like culling is like this way of human reaction to panic because of a virus, which is fair because it is true, like those are literally infection bombs walking around. So culling actually now with African swine fever that has reached Europe, it's been in China for a long time. Culling is being insane. Like, they're killing millions and millions of pigs because to sort of restrain the virus. But in terms of are you asking like is it ever wiped out a species to the point of extinction?
Yeah.
So actually, I remember now, I'm just picking back from my studies, the ferret, the Blackfoot ferret, I think, once caught this disease, and they almost went to extinction. There were like 3 individuals left. You can look it up if you want, but I'm pretty sure that is one of the few cases where disease almost brought a species to extinction. But examples of humans calling a species to extinction, I cannot think of. Yeah, good question.
So you're talking about the coronavirus, how like was it California, or like someone can just like randomly got it from like someone else, but they won't be like that other person that they caught it from wouldn't be like expressing any symptoms. Do you think like some people could be like carrying the strain without them knowing?
Definitely, 100%, because we've actually seen that it was one of the latest estimates. The percentage is that 80% sort of like are quite asymptomatic, and then the people that actually die from it are 5% of them. 15% have very severe forms, but a lot of them are just asymptomatic. And now these dispersive cases in Italy that happened a week is because we just started testing, we just started diagnosing. Already this morning, 300 of these people are just staying at home because they were found with the virus, but they don't have symptoms. So they just stay at home, just make sure they're in quarantine and they don't pass it around. But all these people just have the strain and they just know because they were tested, and they were tested because they found one bad case. So yeah, that I think that is definitely true. Yeah.
I was recently looking up the coronavirus and like where its locations were, and I didn't see any in Africa. And you said they went to Africa to go get penguins. I think it's not there in Africa showing because they're not testing for it. Is like that why?
So there is this very good map that I got called on this presentation because we gave a seminar last week, and I included the map in that seminar. But it shows in Africa how about, I think, 40% of the states are equipped to test for coronavirus, so the rest, 50-60, is not. So yeah, I think that could definitely be a possibility.
Wasn't it a big issue with like mad cow disease too? How like when they began to realize it like transferred to humans, that's creates called Jacob's disease. Like it's asymptomatic until an older age, correct?
Yeah.
So didn't people like not realize at first that it was from that it was transferred? Yeah.
We didn't realize that it was as bad. Also because it's quite rare to find sort of like zoonotic epidemics in the developed world. So they did not realize. And once they realized, just panic hit. And then they managed to find out why that was happening and looking into the sort of like lack of decency that people had in, regulation and farm. So yeah, no, they didn't know at the beginning. That's true. Yeah.
Okay, going back to the paneling for the coronavirus, since they have been doing this poaching and eating and consuming of the animal for a long time, do you think that some people may have developed a resistance to it or like immunity?
It could be. It could definitely be. The thing is that with this, when there's an epidemic like that, it means that this virus is novel, so it's new and it's potent, it's powerful. So most likely people will develop immunity to it once our immune system get adapted. But I think that for now there's not much immunity to it because it's new. So none of our immune system has ever seen it. It can be that people that have handled them for a long time, and this virus was there for a long time, and it could be that they don't catch it, or they catch it without symptoms. But yeah, like the more exposure leads to a higher chance of immunity. Yes, that's true. I do think that that's infecting worldwide because it's very new. Right? It's a very old strain.
Could you talk a little bit more about your work at the One Health Center?
Yeah, sure. So what I do there, so now in the last couple of weeks it's been crazy, just like coronavirus, because yeah, our director, she's very well known, especially in Italy. She's a virologist, so she's receiving a lot of interviews, and so together we're trying to collect those data that are true. So trying to don't look at the fake news and select those data that are true so that we can put out what is actually true about this virus. So I've been working a lot on the coronavirus now, collecting information. And then me personally, what I do, I'm a liaison between the wildlife community and the One Health. So I'm trying to find research synergies between wildlife diseases and wildlife issues and how, as a system, we can solve them. So to give an example of what I'm working on currently is a cancer that develops in sea turtles here in Florida, on green turtles, as a result of what I suspect being an unsustainable use of the environment. So increased water temperatures and pollution. So we're working actually, it's fun because it's more collaboration. I'm working with an engineer. So he speaks his language and I speak my language. And it's like he's trying to take out the temperatures from the 80s to see what the sea temperatures were like, and I'm taking all the sort of like sampled turtles with disease, and then I'm correlating these two. So really, my work is to find systemic and holistic approaches to solve wildlife issues. So looking also at what's the use of the environment around it, what tools we can use from other disciplines to investigate it. So that's what I do, and then I don't know, the more wildlife diseases pop up and the more I just catch them and try to make projects around it. And then there's a lot of collaborations with my colleagues. So you heard of Sara, she's a classicist, and we're working on, if you follow our Twitter, we're working on a project called Contagious Words, which we are collecting the words of the pandemic. So we're releasing one tweet every day with one word about the pandemic, because it is important. She studies Etymology, which is the origin of words. And I know some words of the pandemic because I've been studying these things for a long time. So we're sort of like collaborating in this and making sure people understand what it means when we're talking about pandemic, so that also fake news are less likely to happen, and so that people can follow truly what's happening with this pandemic. So that's another thing that we're working on. And just new things pop up really.
That's it. Thank you.